I got some stuff that isn't written on the paper just watching that. And I got to tell you that it's cool. It's obviously that my father was cool as the other side of the pillow. It's obvious that my dad knew he was cool as the other side of the pillow, too. Just smooth and cool. And my father had a way of making people accepted and feel comfortable, but he also had a way of dealing out the sugar with a little bit of sour. There's a couple stories I want to tell you before I get started here. One is my friend Zena sitting in the front row. She's been around our family of fixture for a long time. And when my dad first met Zena, we'd come over, we had family dinners, and she was there, and she was sitting in the room, and then happened to be just her and I were in the house, and my dad kind of looked at me and said, "Let me have some time alone with Zena." So I went in the other room and, "Tell me about yourself, Zena." And Zena went through it. Yeah, when I was, 14, 15, I was in Paris. I was modeling, and I took that money. I went to school. Did fascinating. That's just fascinating. Well, then I went to school, and I got an engineer, but I didn't like. That is absolutely fascinating. Incredibly, just fascinating. And I'm in the other room playing the TV, and all I hear is just this fascinating. Goes on for about 5 minutes, and Zena goes through, and you just moved to Texas on your own. Didn't know it. That's just fascinating that a young woman would do that. And I can't see, but I can feel. You know how you can feel when somebody's cheesing in the other room? I could feel that she was just cheesing. Well, I got this. This is locked up on it. This is good. And you don't know my dad. It's coming. It's coming. The boomerang is coming. And so this goes on for a while. And finally he goes, "Well, Zena, I just got to tell you that it's amazing. I don't meet many people like you, but you are absolutely fascinating." But fascinating women hardly ever make good wives. I told you, a little bit sweet with a little bit sour. Where's Don at? I saw Don come in there earlier. There he is. I got more than those stories about Don, because my father used to like to mess with Don, because Don would mess back with him. But there was one particular incident where I had to go to a business trip. And I had season tickets for the Wizards, probably even Bullets back then. And I gave Don the tickets. And Mr. Ward, I think, had season tickets for the Redskins, had given them to my dad, but that week he didn't go, and we actually gave them to Don as well. And this is before cell phones and everything, so I'm down in Florida, been there for a week at this conference, and my dad is supposed to pick me up at National Airport. And so Don fills in the rest of the story to me, and he tells me that my dad gave him a call, said, "Hey, Don, how's it going?" "Oh, it's going pretty well, Mr. Hill." "Hey, you went to the game, didn't you? Did you use the basketball tickets that Andre went? Andre's got some good tickets, doesn't he?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you take a lady with you?" I said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "Oh, so Andre got you in good with your lady." "Oh, and what about the football game? Did you enjoy the football game? Mr. Ward's got some good seats. Did you enjoy the football game? That was good." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Seems like you've had a lot of fun on the hills this week. It's time for some payback." He said, "The boy's coming in from Florida, and I need you to pick him up tomorrow at 2 o'clock. "Well, Mr. Hill, I got a job. At 2 o'clock, I can't just get down and go to National Airport. You enjoyed the game, didn't you, Don?" So, again, I know none of this is happening. I get out of the airport, and I turn left to the right, and I'm just looking, and, it's 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I'm just sitting there like, because I know that my dad is only going to give you one time around. If you miss him, that's it. You're on your own afterwards. And I look, and I see out the corner of my eye, I see my boy Don. He's like, "Dre." I'm like, "Hey, what's up, Don? Who you picking up? How you doing?" And finally, Don told me that he was there to pick me up. And I said, "Oh, man, it must have been something big going on. It must have been something crazy going on. My dad must have hopefully he's okay." We pull up in my dad's house. My dad's just sitting there watching Judge Judy, got his robe on, got his thing. I said, "Dad, why do you want to come pick me up?" He says, "Well, I figured you're grown, and I don't need to do that anymore. Maybe Don can do it better than I can." There's this old hip-hop song that says that funerals are usually filled with slow singing and flower bringing. And we've done the slow singing, we've done the flower bringing. I've had some tears, and the last time I checked up there, it says a celebration of a life well lived. And for those of you keeping store, we are officially starting the celebration part of the program. I guess I should start telling you all that my father was my hero. I can tell you that there were times he helped me in life when I didn't even know that he was helping me. He is the reason I majored in what I majored in college. In fact, he got me my first job in his industry. And he often showed me without even trying what it meant to be a man. I can't tell you the number of times that my dad was available and was there for me. My father was a good man. No, he was probably a very good man. Some have even said that he is a great man. You see, there's this one time I got kicked out of the house and I had a warrant out for my arrest, and my father, this is probably a good time to tell you that these are not my words. These are the words that you have told me about my father, about what he did for you over time. See, the good news is that my father made an impact on a lot of people's lives in this room. The bad news is that one of you is sitting next to the dude who had the arrest warrant right now, and you might want to hold close on your wallet or your purse. But let me be clear that I know that before I was born, I won some sort of heavenly lottery, and the Lord decided that this would be the man who was charged with raising me. And just like Frost said, that made all the difference in my life. And for those of you, and I know that there's some who did not know my father, I can tell you that before Wakanda and before Black Panther, my dad was the original black superhero. And growing up, I had a hard time understanding the stereotypes that said that a black man, the first time he got a chance, that he would abandon his family. I had trouble with the one that I heard often said that in a single parent household that you don't get as much love and structure as you do in other houses. I really had problems with the one that said that there are no role models for young men out there anymore. Because growing up, none of that made any sense to me because I had exactly the opposite of that living no more than 20 feet away from me. You see, I grew up under the tutelage of someone who gave up everything to ensure that no matter what else was going on around me, that I was going to be okay. When his wife, my mother, passed, his life literally fell apart. He found himself living in a neighborhood where he could not afford it just on his income. That was not the plan. He had 2 young boys who were dependent on him for everything, and he had a whole host of relatives in Ohio saying, Bobby, just send the boys back here and we'll raise them. That was the easy choice. That was the choice that so many people have been made. And if he had made that choice today, I'd be a Cincinnati Bengals fan. And you know that's bad. But even worse than that, I'd probably be nowhere sitting on a milk carton drinking a 40 wearing a wife beater just like so many others from the neighborhood where my father grew up. But instead, he decided to do what was difficult, what people told him not to do, which was to give up all of his hope and dreams just so that Mark and I could have some in our future. See, my father used his life to make a real impact on other people's lives. It started out with Mark and myself, but it really, if you got in within a 10-mile radius of 18221 Queen Elizabeth Drive, Albany, Maryland, 20832, that impact hit your life as well. You see, I don't want to tell you this, but I know for a fact that I've always known that my father's been more popular with my friends than I have. How do I know this? It was not uncommon for me to come home from the store, or from the school or whatever, and to walk in and look at the kitchen table and see one of my very best friends sitting there cutting up with my dad. And I'm excited, thinking, oh man, he wanted to hang out with me so much, he got home before I did. That's all right. So I walk up into the kitchen and both of them would look at me and say, this conversation's got nothing to do with you. In fact, I remember one time my friend Timmy, I'm sorry, Timmy's a big-time executive today. He goes by Tim or Timothy, but back in the day, he was Timmy. And I came in the front door, and my dad had a porch where he had built in some barbecue pits in the back of the house, and Timmy and my dad were sitting at the back table, and both of them were sitting there and had a soda in their hands, and they were talking and laughing. And I figured I'd go outside and see what my best friend was talking about. So I get to the door, and Timmy looks up to me and says, hey, Andre, you mind if I get a second with your father? Alone? So I went back in. Didn't want them to see that I was hurt, but I was still peeking out the corner of my eye. And they had a conversation that went on, this long, drawn-out, animated discussion. And when it was over, Timmy walked right past me and head out the front door. Didn't even say a word. I looked at my father kind of like, and my father just looked at me the way the only he could. He says, you know what? Timmy needs to learn how to handle his business with women. And you need to get some business of your own. And I was thinking, how did this become about me? Now, in full disclosure, there was also some positives to that because every girlfriend that I met afterwards, after they met my father, immediately they start looking at me perplexed. They start have that quizzical look. And they were thinking this. They were thinking, I don't know if I can deal with all of this, but I'm thinking one day you might become that. They're like, your dad is just so smooth. When is the transformation going to happen? My point, though, earlier is that my father's presence and strength attracted those who were in need. It could have been something as trivial as a high school or college romance, or as serious as being in trouble with the law. Or maybe it was feeling that your life was a failure and you wanted to give up. Or maybe it was just that you needed help dealing with the death of your parent. Or maybe you were a little behind in your rent or your tuition or your grocery bills. The problems that came in our front door were real. And even if my father's help was only small, help was always given. I remember one time, and Mark, I hope you remember this as well, I couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old, probably less than a year from when my mother passed. And my father gathered Mark and I, and he told us that we need to be on our best behavior, not to say too much, and be sure to eat anything that's put in front of us and don't complain about it. Now, that's very unusual instructions that really didn't seem to make much sense to me until about 30 minutes later, we pulled up in a less than perfect neighborhood in Northeast Washington, D.C. I remember that there were a crowd of people that met us on the street, and they excitedly walked us up all the way to the fourth floor into the back to a small studio apartment. And inside that studio apartment, there had to be 40, 50, 60 people in that room. And I just remember it being hot and malodorous, I think is the word. The only people that were sitting down were myself, my brother, and my father. And for what seemed to be hours, people would come up, person after person. They would come up and they'd say words to my father. And some would be crying and they'd show him pictures. And eventually more people came into the apartment. To the apartment you couldn't even stand, you couldn't even breathe. And they all ended up praying and laying hands on my father. And I sat there, 10, 11 years old, hot, confused. And it turns out that these were all people that my father had helped in finding jobs. Most of them were immigrants from Africa, and they were having a hard time surviving in a D.C. that is not like the D.C. of today. And I can't remember the words they said, but I do remember showing them showing pictures of children saying, "This child eats because of you." And what had an even bigger impact on me was on the way home, my father didn't make a big deal of it. He just said it was normal. And the message was clear that you should live your life in a way that benefits others, even if at the exact same time your life is falling apart. Look, there was a period of time when my father was sick over these past few months where he spent about 2 or 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility. And he was there, he's trying to work to get his arms and his strength back in his legs. And while he was there, I visited every day, and just about every day, I saw many of you come to visit my father as well. Or I heard that you were just there, or I saw a note saying that you were going to come tomorrow. And then while I was also there, the phone would constantly be ringing off the hook. His Aunt Goldie would send him a letter every single day, and we would read it every single day. The nurses would come in, and I'm thinking, don't they have other patients? They just come and sit and talk. And I should tell you something, that this room was not a private room, it was a shared room. On the other side of the curtain was a man named Tony. Tony had just had a leg amputated, and he was kind of in the bed in a wheelchair. And one day, I think I got there too early because my father was in the gym. He was still working out. So I decided just to go. I was going to wait in the room. And Tony and I got there, and when I was small talking with Tony a bit, and he said, "Andre, what kind of work did your father do?" And before I could answer, he said, "I mean, there are so many people that come in to see him. And they all tell these incredible stories. I hear them on the other side of the curtain for hours every single day. They tell stories about being with your father and what your father did for them, or they just sit there and they laugh. And I hear these stories and seeing these people come over, and they all come to check on him, and the phone calls and the letters. I keep sitting here asking myself, what kind of man is this?" Then his voice kind of trailed off because I recognized that in the weeks that I'd been there, not one person had come to visit Tony. And he said, "What kind of man is this?" That man was my father. He was far from a perfect man. He knew a whole lot of words and a whole lot of jokes that aren't in any Bible. He could be stubborn. He could be bullheaded. He could hold a grudge for years. He grew up off the corner and lived through a whole lot of difficult things and experienced more than his fair share of tragedies. But what I will remember about my father, my mentor, my best friend, is that he always used his fourth bedroom. What do I mean by that? Our house in Albany was a 4-bedroom house. And with only 3 of us there, it meant that there was a spare bedroom. And in most of our houses today, yours and mine included, that's the room that collects dust or eventually becomes a den or a study. Well, in our house growing up, that wasn't the case. it seems to me that there was always someone living in the fourth bedroom. And thinking about it while I was writing this message, I counted more than 10 or 12 people just off the top of my head. None of them were related to us, and some may have stayed only a month or two, but others stayed for years. The circumstances of how they knew my father varied, but the common denominator was that for that period of time, they needed some assistance in their lives. And our fourth bedroom and my father was there for them. And if Mr. Tony from the other side of that curtain was here today, I would say that is the kind of man that my father was. And I believe that his challenge to both Mark and myself and to each one of you has had a personal relationship with my father. His challenge to each of us is that we should use our fourth bedroom. Whatever that fourth bedroom is in your life, for some of you, it's just spending time with someone. For some of you, it's your resources. For some of you, it actually literally is a bedroom that you can bring in and share with somebody and show them the love in your family. Whatever it is, we should all use our fourth bedroom to serve others and to glorify God. Look, the Bible tells us that we are spirit encased in a fleshly body. And I believe that my father's ruha, his pneuma, his spirit has returned from whence it came. And all we have left now is this flesh to bury. Before he passed, he told me he did not fear what would happen to him after death. He had some trepidation about how he would get to that point, but because he was secure in his relationship with our Lord through our Savior, Jesus Christ, he knew where he was going. And it's that assurance that I pray that each one of us has today. My father was my best friend. And as I close, I've come to realize that not many sons have their relationships grow with their father to the point that they can say that. I'm thankful that I can. The lessons that he left me will live on as long as I do, and hopefully even longer. And I just want to say I thank each and every one of you for the love that you've shown my family and my father, not just during this week, but for his entire life. And I leave you with the words of 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. For I hear my father's well-lived life speaking through these words. As for me, my life has already been poured out as an offering to God. The time of my death is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race, and I have remained faithful. And now the prize awaits me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on the day of his return. And the prize is not just for me, but to all who eagerly look forward to his appearing. I thank you. And Dad, I truly love you. And I say this all in the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ.